Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a special returning guest, Lauren Southern, who had the privilege of finally meeting in person over the weekend. Lauren, thanks so much for taking the time to come back on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, you just dropped an episode about J.R.R. Tolkien, and people always bring him up because, I was the compiler of the Anarchist Handbook. And people always bring up Tolkien as an example of someone who was, if not an anarchist full blown, he was a pre-anarchist. Now, is that correct?
He was absolutely an anarchist. I mean, you might not like his version of anarchism because he was a monarcho-anarchist, which is a
Oh,
very fun little mix there. But no, he hated statism. Didn't matter if you were Tory, communist, fascist, hated it all. Wanted mainly to be a society like the Shire, where it was
oh.
all everyone just lived in this happy little libertarian realm.
So was that a surprise to you to learn this about Tolkien? How did you discover this?
Yeah, so I'm sure you've seen the new Amazon Tolkien Lord of the Rings version that they've created, and it's very woke. You got girl bosses in there, apparently a bit of queerness added to it. And one of the scholars who is working on the Amazon series came out and said, we don't necessarily know Tolkien's beliefs, so we have to look into it. He died in the 70s. We have to make sure that we apply his work to the ideology and struggle today, and it's our duty to do that and interpret it. And I was like, maybe publicly Tolkien didn't say that much about his politics, but considering he's a devout Catholic, I somehow doubt he would have been an ally to modern interpretations of LGBTQ plus QRY philosophy and ideology. So I went
Wait,
and
wait, one more thing. I love the idea that someone who's such an extremely prolific writer, we'd have no idea what this guy thinks.
Yeah.
It's like, right? Like, there's no way of finding out.
Someone who called themselves a Tolkien scholar, right? And it's like his letters are public. You can go and read these. I just spent a night with some caffeine at 3 a.m. reading these. I didn't get a degree in this. And he's like, the guy didn't even believe in divorce, right?
Oh,
As
wow.
if that would ever be compatible with sleep around everything. He called women who enjoy casual sex abnormalities.
Oh.
Full-on anarchists, supported blowing up power stations to stop the expansion of the state. Like, there is nothing compatible with Tolkien's beliefs of sexuality, government, and the modern progressive, who obviously believes in massive community planning, sexual complete freedom. Just nothing compatible if you actually read his work. But no one does the reading. No one does the reading ever.
Well, and you're also discouraged from doing the reading because then it's independent thought and you have to press the independent thought alarm. When I was a kid, I was a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, which is obviously very heavily derived, if not directly derived, from Tolkien's Middle-earth. And something that after the Black Lives Matter protests and riots happened was Wizards of the Coast, the company that now owns the Dungeons and Dragons franchise. They issued some statement to the effect that orcs, which are the bad guy like thug race from Middle Earth and also appear in Dungeons and Dragons, like they're the easy bad guys to kill if you're clearing out a dungeon.
Yeah.
We were told that orcs are racist and they were going to make moves to remove orcs from the like pantheon, which and let me assure you, as someone who's played this and has known many people play this, no one ever thought that orcs stood in for minorities. That's not a thing. The twisted logic that this has to be a thing means someone is really trying to reduce everything to American, Jim Crow era or contemporary politics, which is very bizarre because they don't have electricity other than lightning bolts and things like that. However, now the inverse has happened. And can you explain to me about the Amazon thing but the good races are minorities? So how are they doing this like kind of double talk?
Well, okay, first of all, I love those situations where someone points out some supposed racism and everyone's like, bro, you're the only one who thought of that. Like,
Yeah.
That's your mind. You're the only one who thought the monkey picture was racist. And why were you thinking that, bro? That's always funny. But with the Amazon stuff, it's more so the addition of queerness to
Okay.
Tolkien's work. And this is what has been said by people who have watched it and reviewed it. They said, oh, there's queer representation, there's racial representation. It's all about diversity now. And this has also happened with the Tolkien Society, who are dedicated to preserving his work. They've done whole series and conferences on transgenderism themes in Gondor, the femininity of dwarves, all of these themes that Tolkien would have just found absurd. Gay atheism, I'm pretty sure, was one of the topics the Tolkien Society held. And it just, they're diverting from what Tolkien's actual vision was. Like, they created a black female dwarf who has no beard. In his works, he's always said, actually, female dwarves are extremely masculine, have beards, and a lot of the hardcore fans are disappointed. But even if they just wanted to tweak a few things like that for creative reasons, I don't think people would have minded. It's the fact that they've made it the direct objective diversity. Okay. That's when I'm concerned, is you put diversity over the actual plot line. If it fit that there was a character that was just going to be black and they happened to be the best cast for that role, villain or good guy, great, awesome. Clearly that wasn't the priority. Clearly the priority was getting every single possible, checkpoint on the diversity list done. And they keep doing this with so many different works. Amazon ruined Wheel of Time. Did you ever read that when you were growing up?
Is that by something Jordan? What's his name?
Yeah, Robert Jordan.
Yeah.
Those were great books. They just keep taking, I don't know, that we're in a bit of a creative drought. And they're going and taking from some of the best pools of creativity from the past and trying to remake them. But it's like, they just don't have the ability to do it. They don't have the same minds, and they're not willing to rely on the minds who initially created it. So they just try to remake it in their own distorted image.
Yeah, I covered this in The New Right, which came out 3 years ago now, because when on Star Trek, was it Voyager? One of those. I despise Star Trek. And Tulak, I think his name was, and they said, oh, there's an article that said we finally have a black Vulcan. And my autism just hit to a 10, because the idea that on this planet Vulcan, I didn't know where it's supposed to be, that the races would evolve identically to the races on Earth is so demented. It's like saying, oh, we're finally going to see a black polar bear or a black lion. It's like, that doesn't make sense. Like, a species will evolve differently depending on conditions. And the premise that they're going to evolve, like, there's going to be necessarily an Africa on Vulcan that's going to lead to these kind of physiological conditions, is so nonsensical. And then the person who was playing the character said, well, some racists have a problem with it. And they're like, oh, look, we have white supremacist Star Trek fans. And it's like, first of all, there's nothing surprising that a white supremacist like Star Trek. Let's leave that aside. But the idea that the only person who would be opposed to having like identical biodiversity on another planet would be a white supremacist is also insane. And I'm still triggered about it.
Yeah. And nerds like things to make sense.
Yes.
Like, that's the problem. They've got all of these, like, LA creative types that are like, ooh, this will be cheeky and fun. And then the nerds watching are losing it because they've all got autism, of course. But yeah, even if with like the Middle Earth stuff, they want to have all these girl bosses in it, right? And I'm sorry, but fantasy is based in, medieval era where women were raped and subjugated, and that just happens to be the time, and it's going to be analogous to that time in a lot of cases. If you want to rewrite your own fantasy where it's not based on this kind of medieval era, fine, you do that, but that's not really Lord of the Rings.
But didn't they have that girl who was like the elf or whatever, the blonde girl?
Yeah, Galadriel is supposed to be a mega girl boss in this, and they do have outliers. I don't have a lot of faith that it's going to be done well. Maybe it will be done well. I don't know.
So anyway, are they going to say that the elves are all gay because they're like all girly? Like, what?
Well, they've got black elves now, and they haven't even put like, long locks of hair and everything on them. And I'm like, where did this random black elf with short hair come from? And how does this add up with the history of Middle Earth? I don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
If we want to play this game, Wizards of the Coast, we can play it, because within Dungeons & Dragons, there is a race called the Dark Elves, and they're all evil, and they live underground. But if you're going to play it, that's the race you want to get rid of. But they had a series of New York Times bestselling novels by R.A. Salvatore about them, about the black elf who's actually a good guy, Driz Duarden, whatever his name was. That is his name. I'm acting like I don't remember. But if you really want to, there actually is a race that ports much better this anyway. But it's oh God, okay. I love that we still have Fume as a sponsor. Quitting smoking is the best thing you could do for your health. and Fume can help you get there. Lots of you have tweeted at me how you've used Fume to help you quit smoking, and I, for one, could not be happier. Fume is a natural inhaler designed for a better, safer, and natural way to quit cigarettes. No smoke, no vape, no nicotine replacement. What it replaces is that hand-to-mouth habit of smoking, which is that ritual, which is so hard for so many people to break. Fume is made of 100% Canadian maple. They have these cores infused with plant oils that are studied to curb cravings. They have flavors like peppermint. Conquer has minty notes to stimulate menthol cigarettes. Lemon Berry Bliss for sweet experience. Their flavors are all 100% natural, no chemicals, no flavors, and absolutely no nicotine. Guys, smoking's expensive. At the very least, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of money. Quitting is tough, but Fume can really help, and they've got thousands of 5-star reviews from smokers who tried everything else, and this works. Whether you're a smoker or an ex-smoker who still struggles with cravings, Fume is the perfect tool for you. It's time to create positive habits and quit naturally Fume. And I'm glad to be a part of helping to make it easier. If you head to breathefume.com/malice, breathefum.com/malice, use promo code malice, you get 10% off your order. You're going to save on cigarettes you aren't buying. You're not going to have to buy breath mints. Your teeth won't be as yellow when you save on your initial purchase of Fume. That's 10% off your entire order when you head to breathefum.com/malice and use code malice. You guys ever feel like you're being followed around the internet? Maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you. So our sponsor, IPVanish VPN, is here to help you take back your privacy and help you become anonymous on the internet. IPVanish is a virtual private network, a VPN for short, which is an important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use a VPN on your computer, tablet, phone, whatever it is when you're streaming media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're watching, what you're searching, what you're reading. I know what you guys are doing, whatever it is that you're doing. That's important because what you're doing on the internet is no one's business but your own. For a listener of the show, IPVanish is offering 65% off their annual plan, only $375 a month. Super easy to use. Turn on with one click. It runs in the background, helps to protect you while you're browsing the web. Go to ipvanish.com/malice and use promo code malice. That's MALICE to get your 65% off savings. Their annual plan is just $44.99 for the first year with our discount. This is the time to sign up because with our discount and their current promotion, you can get a VPN for 65% off the usual offering. Here's the thing. IPVanish is the best of the best. 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot with over 6,000 reviews. Remember, it's ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting yourself online. Let's get back to the show. Let's talk about something more fun. So I had Mike Cernovich on a couple of weeks ago. Last week, I had Curtis Yarvin, Menches Moldbug. You are probably the only person I know who interviewed Alexander Dugan. Now, Alexander Dugan is described in Western circles as basically like the Rasputin behind Putin. He's kind of his spiritual advisor. He's being blamed or credited with a lot of Putin's ideas and ideology. Before we get to your interview with him, you got a lot of heat for talking to him by Kathy Young, who's the internet's Igor. Can you break down, do you regret talking to Dugan, and what was that criticism based on?
Not at all. I think that was an extremely valuable conversation. A friend of mine, Michael Millerman, who studied Dugan and was nearly kicked out of his PhD program in Ontario for doing so, absolutely mad. He sent out a tweet the other day in which he said, I got to restrain some ego in myself to snap at all of the people who told me my studies of Eurasianism were useless. I want to snap at all of these people who told me it was dangerous, a foolish thing to study the mind of Putin. And now they're all coming to me. I've got all of these minds in government, business, and politics coming to call me saying, holy crap, we've ignored this entire ideology that is now going to be one of the most important topics in geopolitics for the next year. And we have no idea what to do with it or where to even begin. So he's like, yes, this is a valuable thing to understand and study. And I'm really glad that I was there early and got some of these ideas out there. Even if you hate Russia and want to see it nuked or leveled today, right? You still need to understand your enemy. You need to understand how they think in order to compete with them. How did
that interview get set up, and were you nervous?
Yeah, I was able to get his email just through random contacts I had in Russia. That sounds terrible, but there are a lot of Russians.
Is it the Dug@gmail.com?
The Dug. Should I dox him right now? No, but people have obviously this like crazy idea about Dugan as like, oh, he's going to show up with like his fascist army behind him or whatever, and he's like this scary, dangerous Rasputin guy. You just replied via email, hey Lauren, like would love to meet up. Went and he showed up at I was staying at a hotel called the legendary Sovietsky. It was quite cool actually. They had posters of Stalin and I think Rasputin as well, all of the people that had stayed there historically.
Oh, wow.
And someone was playing harp every day in the hotel. It was gorgeous. And he was standing outside wandering around in the park, and we went and found him. Really just like nice old dude.
Does he speak English?
Yes, it's not that great.
Okay.
Like obviously his Russian is significantly better. And I've been told by people who have translated his Russian, if you really want to get into his ideology, well, it has to be in Russian. But we were able to get a pretty good interview with him regardless. I only speak one language, so I can't be judging.
You don't speak French?
Je ne sais pas.
What kind of Canadian are you? Good Lord, lady.
West Coast, best coast Canadian, all right?
Well, so what was the takeaway? Did he seem to you like a crazy person, like a warmonger, like a quasi-fascist?
No, I see. There are so many people who call him a fascist, and it triggers me so much because that just tells me they're talking about Dugan when they haven't even read the first 3 pages of his book.
Well, his books, you can't get them now. They've kind of banned them.
You can find PDFs online if
what I'm saying is
most things.
No. But what I'm saying is just for people who don't realize it's not as easy to get as you would think for someone who is undisputably a major thinker in terms of influencing Putin.
Yeah, for sure. It's harder to find. They've nearly outlawed studying of him. Like I said, I think it was 12 professors that Michael Millerman had on his PhD, and he only had 1 at the very end. The rest were trying to get him kicked out of the university and trying to cancel him from getting his PhD. They felt it was so dangerous to study this ideology because Millerman believes in something called strategic empathy, where you really like try to get in the mind and understand the other side. And they're like, that's dangerous because you might get, grasped by it. That's the danger of strategic empathy, that you might actually understand the enemy and have real sympathy, not just strategic for them. But he finished his degree anyways. But yeah, it's massively restricted in the institutions. And that's because it is the antithesis of liberalism. So this is actually Dugan's theory. So he says there's 4 political theories. The first one is liberalism, which has lasted the longest. It was the first and it's lasted the longest. So this individualism, it's about, the individual. Then the second is communism, which he says died decrepit old age, failed. Fascism kind of died in a blitzkrieg of foolish youthful decisions, didn't make it. So he doesn't like fascism and communism. He thinks they were failures. The first 2 pages of his book, everybody, you can read them, all right? And then the last is the 4th political theory, which he believes is going to be what comes next to oppose liberalism, because liberalism is necessarily eating itself. It kind of stands for nothing anymore. And he almost sees today as people that stand for anything versus people who stand for nothing, which is what liberalism has become. And I wanted to read this bit from his book, actually, just to explain why this is so important to understanding what Russia is doing.
Okay, let's get both our channels destroyed. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Russian people suffer their integration into global society as a loss of their own identity. The Russian population had almost entirely rejected the liberal ideology in the 1990s, but it is also apparent that a return to the illiberal political ideologies of the 20th century, such as communism or fascism, is unlikely, as these ideologies have failed and proven themselves unequal to the challenge of opposing liberalism, to say nothing of the moral costs of totalitarianism. Therefore, in order to fill this political and ideological vacuum, Russia needs a new political ideology. For Russia, liberalism does not fit, but communism and fascism are unacceptable. Consequently, we need a 4th political theory. And if for some readers, this is a question of freedom of choice and the realization of a political will, which can always be viewed from a positive or negative position, then for Russia, it is a matter of life or death, to be or not to be, in terms of Hamlet's eternal question. If Russia chooses to be, then it will automatically bring about the creation of a 4th political theory. Otherwise, for Russia, there remains only the choice not to be, which will mean to quietly leave the historical and world stage, dissolving into a global order which is not created or governed by us. So Russia and their ideology truly see it as we either take our stand ideologically against globalism, liberalism in the West, or we become a part of them and cease to exist.
So
It's an existential question.
this is very similar to the North Korean Juche idea, because a lot of times, if you go to travel to North Korea, there's like a frequently asked questions. One, this is, are they going to try to brainwash you? And the answer, which is truthful, is the North Korean ideology of Juche, or the Juche idea, is only applicable to Koreans. Like, it's not something that can be exported. It's by us and for us. You guys can go to hell as far as we're concerned. Korea is the most important, best country in the world. So it seems very clear that his concern is, well, if everyone on earth is going to have some globalist ideology in different shades, and America and Britain, they're more similar than they're different in terms of politics. What does that mean to be Russian? Are we just going to be America Junior? It's like this is an issue for Canadians. Like, Canadians are often more concerned with American politics than they are with Canadian politics. What does that mean then to be a Canadian? It's just kind of like America Junior. So it's interesting that he is kind of hearkening back to that like national sense of identity. If we take our talking points from the West, then how are we anything other than just devolved or Westerners? In which case, we're also going to be like 10th on the ladder, because we're not bringing anything to the table.
It's there's a great book by George Grant called Lament for a Nation, and it's all about the death of Canada sucked into the conglomerate of America. So there's been a lot of nations, like you said, that have worried about this as well. I hate doing nerdy media comparisons. I always mock people who do this. They use Harry Potter as their only reference for the world. But did you ever watch Transformers growing up?
I was, yes, and GoBots.
Okay, so like Unicron, the world eater. So they view America as Unicron.
I heard he's queer and a girl boss now.
Is Unicron a queer girl boss? Well, I guess it's okay for him to eat the multiverse, but they see America as wanting this unipolar world, which is, it's true to an extent, right? Anything that is not liberal is wrong. And if it's not direct engagement to instill an American style democracy, then it's going to be sending NGOs in there to liberalize, sending in academics to liberalize it, because anything that is not a liberal worldview is wrong. It's backwards. It's anti-humanitarian.
I just interject. I think people remember that I think a month before the American embassy fell in Kabul, they were tweeting out like LGBT stuff. And it's like, sure, that's all well and good, but you have to kind of pick your battles. And is this really going to fly among the Afghan population as a whole?
Precisely. So what Dugan views it as is they want a multipolar world. They don't want a Russian world power. They want all of these individual cultures. So he even says towards the end of his book, it's that people who believe in something versus people who believe in nothing but the conglomerate. So we want Hindus, we want Jews, we want Christians, Muslims. They are all united in this fight against liberalism. Like men, women, anyone that's grasping onto a belief is going to be in this to create this multipolar world rather than a unipolar world. And this is the problem, is that is a worthwhile idea to consider, right? It's a more complex issue than just, Russia, big baddie, West, big good guy. Do I think invading Ukraine is a good thing? No, of course not. I hate that I have to, I hate having to always put these stipulations before everything I say when I have a conversation. Like, of course, what they're doing is bad, but we still need to consider the good parts of their ideology and the good critiques they have. Because if we have no self-criticism as the West, as a liberal society, well, we're going to become exactly what they expect us to do. A culture that just becomes Unicron, tries to eat the rest of the world and never self-reflects.
Hey guys, love to talk to you about Sheath underwear. It's the only underwear I own, and it's the only underwear I wear. And that's because I'm not just the host of You're Welcome. I'm also a Sheath underwear model. What a hunk. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you get 20% off your order, and you'll be getting closer to having the most comfortable underwear you're ever going to wear. Why are they so comfortable? Besides the fabric that they're made of, it keeps away the heat, keeps away the moisture. They have special dual pouch technology with one part for one part of your guy's anatomy, one part for another part of your guy's anatomy. You try it on the first time, you're like, what is this? And after, you're like, oh, this is the most comfortable underwear I've ever owned. Support the underwear that supports you. That's Sheath Underwear. Go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice for 20% off, and you can get the new Malice pair. Your Welcome is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you get a great rate in car insurance, even if it's not with them. They have this nifty comparison tool that puts rates side by side. So you choose a rate and coverage that works for you. So let's say you're interested in lowering your rate on your car insurance. Visit progressive.com to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and easy to compare, so that all you have to do is choose the rate and coverages you like. Progressive gives you options so you can make the best choice for you. You could be looking forward to saving money in the very near future. More money for, say, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, an Instapot, more puzzles, whatever brings you joy. Get a quote today at progressive.com. It's one small step you can do today that can make a big impact on your budget tomorrow. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Let's get back to the show. It also seems that, following his logic, and obviously you can't speak for him, but maybe he addressed this, it seems like this would encourage Russia to hew closer towards China, if only for the purpose of having a bipolar world, even if they don't really particularly agree with the Chinese, but as a counterweight toward American and Western liberalism.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Is
Okay.
You're going to have this. You're going to have two worlds. That's what I believe, anyways. Looking at what's going on so far, even with the media split, I think that's terrifying. I think it's terrifying that we're banning all of this Russian media, because we're going to get one story, and it's going to be completely different than what the other half of the world hears. You're going to have the Western story and view of reality, and the Eastern story and view of reality, or Eurasian, and we're going to have like completely different worldviews to a terrifying extent. You can already see it with Ukraine and Russian media. You can tell you're getting 50% of the story from both. If you only read Russian media, you would have thought there was no invasion. You would have thought a lot of crazy things that weren't true, but also a lot of things that are true. If you only read Ukrainian media, global liberal media, you'd think the ghost of Kiev is real. You'd think they just bombed a warship down. You'd think 13 people were killed at Snake Island, all of which is untrue. We cannot operate in a world with only 50% of the story. We're gonna all become little North Koreas on other half of the world.
Yeah, one of the things it's really amazing to me how many people, and I've been trying to figure out Putin's endgame, how many people are content to say that he's evil and he's crazy. It's like, okay, sure. Well, like the penguin is evil. You know what he wants? He wants to get that diamond that's shaped like a bird, or that, really expensive umbrella. Like, just because someone is crazy or a bad person doesn't mean that they're not predictable or coherent, along with their own internal logic. The Zodiac killer wants to kill people. It doesn't mean you have to agree with him or approve of him. It's like, okay, let's see if we can figure out what his last victim is, or what it's going to take to find him.
Yeah, that's the terrifying thing, is most of the people commenting on this Ukraine crisis couldn't even point Ukraine on a map a month ago. They have no idea any of the history. They look at it from a cartoon worldview. Putin is just bad, and he's bad because he's bad, of course. And if you disagree with that, then you're bad.
And what's their end game? Because even if we, and by we I mean the West, pushes Putin successfully out of Ukraine, is the argument, well, we got to go to Moscow and get him out of, Red Square, or whatever they call it now? They still call it Red Square. I mean, that is the logical conclusion to the argument. If he is this unique evil who's invading countries for no reason, you're just going to get him out of one and then just sit in your hands and be like, all right, we'll just wait around for you to invade Estonia or Finland.
Yeah. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of answers to this. I mean, even people suggesting, throw a no-fly zone up, nuke him now, do this, do that, just end it. I mean, the worst is the virtue signaling, though. Like, Trudeau has done 700 talks with different people about how bad Putin is, and tweets out about it every day. I've done another talk. I've done another talk. I've done another talk. At least someone who suggests causing nuclear war is actually progressing things forward, even if in a bad way. Then you've got all these politicians that are just pretending they're doing things, but it's all razzle dazzle. It's all a television show, which is another thing Dugan says about the West. He's like, you're all living in a reality TV show. That's it.
He says that.
Yeah, all of your this is I've got his definition of post-anthropology up here. So he says, there's anthropology, which is the study of man and how he relates to the world around him, all of that. And we're living in post-anthropology, which he defines as In political post-anthropology, all is reversed. Leisure and work, the most serious occupation, actual work, is watching television shows. Knowledge and ignorance, complete idiots, are given jobs as academics, public and private. The tiniest, most insane details of one's life are the center of attention in this reality show, even in political debate. Traditional male and female roles are reversed. Rather than being esteemed and experienced elders, politicians are chosen for their youth, glamour, appearance, and inexperience. Victims become the criminals, and vice versa. So when we're like sitting here talking about our pronouns and everything, he's like, oh, that's just like the crazy reality show of the West. You guys have fun with that. And that becomes the focus of our political debate and conversation and everything.
So one of the other things that you and I were just talking about is you were flying to Canada from Australia to attend a funeral, and there was all sorts of drama at the airport. Like, so as COVID is, I don't know if COVID's winding down so much as they're just trying to pretend it never happened and they just stopped talking about it. Kind of like when a wife learns her husband's cheating, but she just looks the other way because the marriage is too comfortable and there's kids and who needs the drama. What was the situation going on there?
Yeah. Here we go again. I know you're probably like, Lauren, stop talking about Russian ideology. You're gonna get my channel banned. But I saw the other day, it was horrific. They had Russian soldiers in Red Square going through and asking people to see what was on their phone and saying, we're going to arrest you if you don't show us what's on your phone, right?
Including journalists.
Yeah, because we need to see if you're posting pro-Ukraine stuff. Horrific. Unfortunately, this happens in the West as well. Just people can't see it publicly yet. When I was on my way to come to Canada for a funeral, I was stopped, and because of COVID, there are very few flights, and you have to put in all of these applications to actually leave the country, even if you're not a citizen there. You have to get special permission. And if you miss this window of, I've got my COVID test, I've got my special permission, I've got my flight, it's probably going to be months before you get another flight.
Literally?
Yeah, for real.
Holy crap.
It takes months to approve. Even, with my visa stuff personally, it can take up to a year to get things approved. But when I was at the airport, they pulled me into a back room and said, you want to get on that flight? You want to see your family, go to a funeral, give us all of your technological devices, your phones, your computer, your hard drives, and give us the passwords, or we won't let you go.
Are you serious? And they said explicitly?
Yeah, completely.
These were the equivalent of TSA agents?
Yeah, these were not TSA. They're what are they called? They're like the border security
customs
agents. Yeah, customs agents. And they took all of my devices with all, I tried to say no. I tried to say I want a lawyer, all of that. And normally if I had time, that's something I would do, as this has happened to me in other countries before.
Wait, really?
In the UK, they tried to do this, and I just said I want a lawyer, and and I stayed in a cell for like 9 hours.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
But I was like, yeah, I want a lawyer. And they said, okay, we could do that, but it's going to take days, knowing full well I'm not going to go and be able to see my family or make this funeral. So I was like, I've got nothing to hide. I'm not a terrorist. Whatever, you want to look through my folders, all of my documents. I mean, that's a massive violation of my privacy. I feel assaulted by the government, but I know I have nothing that you can get me in trouble for, and I want to see my family. So I will sacrifice basically a personal assault by the government on me to see my family. So I gave them all my passwords. They took them into a back room for an hour, and I don't know what they were doing. Could have been putting devices in them, downloading all my information, and then gave it back.
Did you check to make sure you didn't have like keylogger software or something?
I bought whole new computers and devices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good Lord. I mean, when they gave it back to you, what was their affect like? Were they friendly, curt?
I mean, it's always, they leave you with someone in a room to keep an eye on you.
Okay.
And you'll always have someone say, oh, I think this is crazy, but we've been told to do it. Like, we have to do it. So there's always that disconnect between the orders I think they've been given and wanting to actually execute them, which I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts and opinions on.
Well, don't you think it's good cop, bad cop?
Yeah, it could be that too. Playing games, trying to get me to say things. I mean, I've spoken to so many TSA security. They've never gotten me on anything. I've spoken for hours and hours and hours with border agents. And I'm like, you guys are just, you have terrorists coming into the country and you're wasting your time on someone because they have scary internet opinions. I've got no criminal record, never partaken in anything illegal. But that's what it's gotten to, thought criminals. And I think that I'm not a fan of authoritarianism, much like yourself, although you're to a larger extreme than me.
I'm a
I
modern
think,
day Tolkien.
yeah, there you go. When we look at nations like North Korea, Russia, everything, I sometimes feel we just have better PR. I genuinely, I'm like, we have better PR.
Hey guys, we've got a very different kind of sponsor for this episode, the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast you should definitely check out since you're a fan of high quality, fascinating podcasts hosted by other interesting people. In other words, the opposite of this trash fire of a show. Jordan Harbinger covers such a wide range of topics, the weekly interviews with heavy hitting guests, and there are a ton of episodes you'll find interesting since you're a fan of this show. One week, he's talking to an FBI agent who offers techniques on how to get people to like and trust you. Another week, he's talking to someone who found a hidden city in the Amazon. It's just really fascinating stuff from all over the map. There's an episode for everyone, no matter what you're into. The podcast covers a lot, but one constant is his ability to pull useful piece of advice from his guests. You'll find something useful you could apply to your own life, whether that's an actionable routine change that boosts your productivity or just a slight mindset tweak that changes how you see the world. We really enjoy this show, and we think you will as well. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show. That's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER, and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And here's more info on Jordan as a host, jordanharbinger.com/about.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Pedicy.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying, Jonah Goldberg, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's get back to my show. What was your emotional reaction when? Because there's no way you don't know that this was not done intentionally, that they waited to the last minute to look for your stuff. That's clearly the case. They knew
because I've gone back and forth a few times.
Yeah,
but
they knew what they were
until
doing.
COVID, where everything was extremely restricted.
Right. What was your reaction when they said this? When they said, let's go to the bathroom, were you scared? I mean, I would be scared.
They usually question me.
Okay. Oh, so you're used to it by now.
But not, they usually don't make me do that.
Okay.
Give them all of my passwords and everything. And usually it's just a few questions here and there. But that was, I mean, like, I can only describe it as feeling violated. I was pretty upset about it, but I'm so used to being violated by the government that I'm like a battered wife to my governments,
Good Lord. That's all right. That's okay. So you've recently been making a return to YouTube and social media. Has the welcome been more welcoming than it was when you kind of took a break?
I mean, that's hard to say. It's a very different realm than it used to be. It's really hard to compare 2016, 2017, even 2018 YouTube to today. I think that there's a lot more self-censorship, and not for people even trying to get ahead. That's what a lot of self-censorship used to come from, is people are like, oh, I kind of want to work my way into the mainstream. It's for genuine fear of literally not being able to have any voice at all. Real life impacts, as you've seen in my life.
Yeah.
And there's so much misinformation being spread about creators, government, everything. It's such a mess. It's such a mess. I just get a yuck feeling even when I go on Twitter. But it's addicting. It's like crack. But the whole thing is a disaster. It's an absolute disaster, but one you can't look away from, and one it's hard to stop contributing to. But I don't know. Sometimes it feels like you're pouring water on the fire. Sometimes it feels like you're trying to put out the fire by blowing on it and making it worse. But it feels bad to not try anything.
How you're in Canada again right now? How committed are you to staying in Canada? Because I know a lot of people who have thankfully escaped.
Well, I've got choices between Australia and choices between Canada.
Oh, Jesus.
It's out of the I thought Canada was going to be better, but it was kind of out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? And definitely having discussions with my family of which place to stay, and there's complications with visas. And I try not to get into my real life stuff too much
No, sure.
publicly,
Okay.
as it can impact
Yeah.
it. Like death threats against my family, that's very common. That's very common, unfortunately. But there, I feel like, you know, what Tolkien has said in some of his quotes, the problem is the whole world is in one damn bag. There's nowhere you can fly to escape everything that's happening. We're kind of going to hell in a handbasket with globalization.
What was your thoughts as a Canadian, lifelong Canadian, to Trudeau and the truckers, the invocation of the Emergency Act, which was actually validated by Parliament, but also the overwhelming support by, it seemed to me, very bloodthirsty Canadians who just really wanted total sadism, take their kids, take their pets, you know, torture these people?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately very numb to a lot of that because I've
Okay.
experienced so much of this in my personal life. Like I know people who, because of their politics, they can't get mortgages in Canada, and that it's
Wait,
been
how's
like that
that?
because there's lists. We've got like a social credit list within banks, and
Wait, can you explain that? I'm not here. I've not heard of
you
this.
don't know this.
No,
Okay,
no,
well, I
please.
guess people don't, but yeah, there's like this is similar to how it works in most countries. Usually when it comes to immigration, banking, you've got lists for people that are criminals.
Sure.
And if you've got a felony offense, you will be added to this list and you will come up with a check mark. And it's going to be really hard for you to do basic things in life, get a mortgage, travel, visit places. They've started adding political personalities to this list.
When did this happen, Ballpark?
This has been happening for years.
Holy crap. Okay.
Yeah, I have someone that I just met last week who ran a giant, sorry, not last week, it was a few weeks ago, who ran a giant kind of right-leaning blog online. I just met them at the park and it was kind of a wild experience. And they were like, yeah, I literally had to buy my house all in cash. They wouldn't let me get a mortgage. They wouldn't let me leave the country, anything. I had to shut down everything I did. And obviously I know this on a travel level. I'm on some lists for my opinions when it comes to travel. So this is all stuff I've experienced within on a global level, on just a Canadian level, and I'm just seeing it used against other people as well now for more minor things. Although I don't think publishing documentaries or making YouTube videos is major.
Well, I mean, I think that people in America don't appreciate how popular, or at least people feel justified what Trudeau did against those truckers were among the Canadian population at large.
There was another aspect too, though. That's terrifying. But there's also I got so much hope from the trucker stuff.
Sure.
I never knew that. I actually thought it was worse. I thought it was like 90% of Canadians wanted to just see me executed. And then I drive through the street and everywhere I went, other side of the country from where the protesters were happening, honking, flags, hundreds of people on the overpasses, the whole drive for hours down the highway. And I think that's part of the reason the crackdown came so hard. People that had been convinced Canada was this entirely liberal, cozy, always going to vote leftist country, always support the government country. They realized that actually a lot of their fellow Canadians don't agree with them, and they've just been silent for a very long time, but they're fed up. And I think that terrified a lot of them. And they just wanted to see the hand of government crash down as hard as it could on these people popping up all over the place that they never knew existed. They're like, get rid of it, erase it. I never knew this existed. I don't want to know it exists. Just do whatever you have to get these people out of the public square,
Yeah,
and it's their pillars of existence. Everything that they bought from the government, everything they believe about the pandemic, about lockdown. You have people putting cracks in those foundations of what they believe about the world. And that's an existential threat to these people.
That's interesting. So you guys are a few years behind because here in 2016, when Trump got elected, what happened as a consequence was like blue-pilled leftists for a long time were taught that the Trump worldview, whatever you want to define it as, were this fringe, and not in the sense of fringe in terms of on the bell curve, but fringe in terms of percentage of population, minority. We had sat you down for a year and told you voting for Trump is completely unacceptable, that to do so is effectively to decree yourself to be aligned with the Klan and the Nazis. The New York Post or Daily News, I don't remember which one, had a front page of Trump called Antichrist when the Pope criticized him for something when he was just merely a candidate. So, and yet on November, whatever it was, 5th or 3rd, Americans went in and flicked the lever for Hitler Antichrist.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to do because in their mind, there's very few of these lunatics. And now there's enough to elect a president. And because they're passing, they didn't know who's the bad guy, who's the good guy. It looked, they thought 100% of the people I know, but obviously it's not 100. At best, it's like 60. So this was really, like you said, a moment of panic because it's like, wait a minute, I don't know who these people are anymore. And so it seems like a very similar thing. And I think Canada is, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, as an even more extreme example of what America to head to in terms of abolishing the Electoral College. Because if that's the case, then you really just need like kind of Los Angeles, New York, and a few of the cities, and everyone else can go F themselves, and you have enough of the numbers, and it's much easier to turn out people in population density cities than where they're distributed like in rural areas. And in Canada, it seems very much like you have Quebec and Toronto, and the plains and everyone else. What are they called? The ones between the West Coast and
the prairies.
The prairies, that's the one. Yeah. Like they can go F themselves. They don't really count. And I think last election, Trudeau didn't have like a single seat west of Quebec or something crazy.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking. I want to fact check this. Yes. Okay, so this is true. Trudeau, on why his father gave Western Canada the middle finger. There is a very famous event where Trudeau's father literally gave the middle finger. I think it was in Alberta or something. Literally.
And his father was prime minister. People don't know that was his claim to fame. Pierre Trudeau.
Why did your dad give everyone in Western Canada the middle finger? Rather than delve into Pierre Trudeau's alleged role in fostering Western alienation in Canada, Justin Trudeau defended his father for doing the best job he could. Some of the decisions my father made, there were a number of people who disagreed with them quite intensely, and they didn't always get along in the best way, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure. Okay, this sounds like it. I just remember my dad always telling me that story growing up. Lauren, that Trudeau, he literally gave us the middle finger. But that's generally the perception. They just care about the Quebecois. They care about East Coast. And there's actually a movement called Wexit, where it's like Western Canada needs to get out. Alberta, definitely. They've always wanted to get out because it's their oil. It's always BC, Alberta, the prairies that are doing all of the hard lifting, the real work.
Yeah.
And saving Eastern Canada's ass, who get all of the tax dollars. And I do see that happening in America. Interesting. Same thing I kind of saw when I was in Russia interviewing individuals. Everyone in Moscow was like, oh, the Soviet Union was okay when I was asking them about living in it, but it was all the satellite states that were kind of suffering, and the central power of government that were getting all of the funding pumped into it, right? So they have a great positive experience, the majority voters for the government when they live in those hubs, but everyone on the outskirts that are doing all the hard lifting, they're going to have a pretty rough time.
My fellow Americans, if you have an IRA, 401k, or savings account, things are getting scary out there. The government has already printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. The national debt just hit a record $30 trillion, and inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982. It's only a matter of time before we have to pay the piper. If you have $50,000 or more in retirement savings, your money could be at risk. Call my friends at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. Call 866-443-1876 or go to malicelikesgold.com. They'll give you up to $10,000 in free silver when you open an account. That's malicelikesgold.com. It's true. Folks, free email services like Gmail and Yahoo aren't really free. You pay with your privacy. Your business plan, Google has it. Your medical records, Yahoo can sell them to drug companies. We should all be concerned about email surveillance and the risks that come with it. That's why so many people have been using StartMail. It makes you feel safe again. StartMail keeps your email private, period. Every email can be encrypted, even if the recipient doesn't use encryption. And when you delete an email in StartMail, unlike these other sites, it's gone forever. And they use their own servers, not Amazon's, which means they can't be put out of business like Parler. Switching to StartMail is seamless. You can easily transfer all your current email data, so there's no starting from scratch. StartMail is backed by the most stringent privacy laws in the world. Your cybersecurity is never more at risk. Email snoops and scammers are taking advantage of the pandemic with phishing having skyrocketed in the last year. You can take control of your privacy with StartMail before it's too late. Start by securing your email privacy with StartMail. Sign up today. You get 50% off your first year. Go to startmail.com/you're welcome. That's START mail with a T, STARTmail.com/you're welcome for 50% off your first year. Startmail.com/you're welcome. Let's get back to the show. There's no spillover from Seattle to north of the border.
How do you mean by spillover?
Meaning Seattle culture is like hardcore progressive. And I mean, it's almost like a cartoon of like urban progressivism, urban white progressivism. And it's close to the Canadian border, if I'm not mistaken. So I would think that
Vancouver and Seattle are very
yeah.
similar.
So it's
very,
not
very similar.
So Vancouver is this like lefty hub.
Yes, but if you go outside of Vancouver, there's a place called the Bible Belt. So literally you go 30 minutes outside of Vancouver, and then it's like Langley, Abbotsford, Mission, the further and further you go out, it's all the Bible Belt. So it's all like Christian conservatives. They probably get along real well with, with Americans. It's funny when I was driving. So I drove out of Vancouver down the Bible Belt during the trucker protest, and the further you got away from the city, the more and more people you'd see on the overpasses. So it's a lot of these, it's a big problem because all the people that are interviewed by the press are going to be in the city because that's where their hubs are. All of the people that are the movers and shakers in government and policy and in media and influencing are going to be in these cities, and they never go out a bit further where the views are completely antithetical to theirs. So you just don't see it. I never knew it existed until they all started coming out for these trucker protest events myself.
I was going hard on a bunch of Canadian journalists who just seem to be like the lowest forms of life on Twitter.
True.
And, they were wringing their hands about how much pushback they're getting. There was one reporter where he was trying to doing a man on the street outside the convoy, and people were just shouting him down and telling him to get a real job and telling him correctly that he's the enemy of the people. And then there were articles about, oh my gosh, we're being treated so horribly while we're calling you Nazis and advocating for your children to be taken from you for no reason. We're the real victims here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that Canadian reporters, like for the CBC, are actually even worse than the apparatchiks we have here in the States?
I'd say Canada has a little man syndrome.
Okay.
I'll call it. So they, like, our government look to Washington, D.C. and they're like, we want to be like that. And our reporters look to CNN and they're like, we want to be like that. So they become that, but tackier and worse.
Yeah.
So yes, our fake news, I'd say, is worse in a lot of ways than the Americans. Look at the mass grave story. That's one of the biggest international news stories before Russia, Ukraine. Completely fake. There was no real corrections to that. Canada committed a genocide. That'll do great in the headlines. I'm sure that won't have any impact on regular Canadians, like dozens of churches being burnt down, protests and chaos. But yeah, they never corrected that. That was a major story. But I'd say this definitely comes from taking a lot of influence from American media who, you guys have the finest media propaganda. There's no beating that, but Canada puts in a good effort. The tragic part, though, is of course that like the CBC is state funded.
Yeah.
So
they get more. The Americans don't realize this. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation or company, where it's a corporation, I believe, they get more of their money now directly from the government than from advertisers, is my understanding. Please double check that. I do in America, Biden's Build Back Better bill, which just got defeated because Senator Joe Manchin just firmly said he was a no on it. There was a lot of money inside that bill to subsidize media companies. And if they're not responsive to markets and market pressure, and they could just basically have a bailout whenever they do something horrible, there's absolutely almost no reason for them to be responsive to the concerns of average people.
Yeah. And they're going to want to keep reinforcing the current state in place that's lining their pockets, of course. This always pisses me off.
And they'd have to, right? If the only thing keeping the lights on is the government, it would be suicidal, quite literally, for me as an organization to turn against them.
Completely. That's why I think it's fantastic that Twitter has come out and put a little thing that says Russian state affiliated media behind RT. I think it's fantastic. They put Chinese state affiliated media behind that. Now, where the hell is the BBC, CBC, and all of the Western ones? Why do we not show that our state fund media as well? As if we don't, like, do you think that Chinese people and Russian people aren't human beings like
Right.
us? We all have the exact same temptations to appeal to where our checks come from. Like, why wouldn't we have that for everyone that is doing that?
So is there, it seems like other than maybe Maxime Bernier, who's, it's very, in the Canadian system, it's really tricky because you're first past the post. So even if you're at 10% in the polls, you're still not going to get any seats unless there's all the votes are localized in one specific riding, which the Green Party with Elizabeth May was successful in doing. Do you think there's any hope whatsoever for Canada in the near future? Is the Conservative Party seems like even more of a joke than the Republican Party?
Yeah, the Conservative Party, they got a good lesson this time around because they went full liberal. I'd say they were full on for the vaccine passports. They fired representatives. I think it was their Yukon riding that they kicked one of their party members out for being against the vaccine passports, and they got destroyed on this topic. So the PPC, People's Party of Canada, who were anti-mandates, Maxime Bernier, I can't remember what percentage of the vote they got, but if you look in the individual ridings, you can see had all of the PPC voters voted Conservative instead, the Conservatives would have won by a landslide. They would have been fine, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So because you'd always see, okay, Liberal candidate won 4,000 votes, Conservative candidate won 3,000, PPC won 2,000 or something, right? And if you had added up those two votes, Conservatives would have come out on top. But this is what I don't get. So they went with this full liberal platform, gun banning, passports, all of this. But why would a liberal be won over by someone that's just a liberal light? Why wouldn't they just vote for the actual liberal? Whereas you're going to lose actual conservatives. Mind-boggling to me. And that riding where the candidate was kicked out in Yukon for being anti-passport, 100% would have won had he not been kicked out. So they were over this vaccine passport issue. They lost the election, in my opinion.
Yeah. But is there, so right now they have an interim leader. Is there talk within the Conservative Party of moving the party in a more pro-freedom direction?
I think they know they have to.
Okay.
That's why they kicked out O'Toole. And that's why they're kind of playing with who to put in power. But they're hedging their bets. You can tell when a lot of Conservatives came out in support of the truckers, and then as soon as it started getting massively shut down and they were getting labeled like terrorists, having their bank accounts shut down, all of those voices kind of got quiet. They started putting out their little condemnations here and there. So they're hedging their bets too much. It's like they don't have any actual solid position of what they believe. We are the Conservative Party. We are against XYZ. It's we are the Conservative Party, and we're going to wait to see what the polls say.
Yeah. What is the feeling in Canada towards increased involvement in the war between Ukraine and Russia?
I mean, I think Trudeau personally, it's hard. I can't speak for all Canadians, but I think he's making a bit of an embarrassment of Canada. He's just going on this tour worldwide, taking selfies, tweeting out, I've had a conversation. I've had another conversation. I've had another conversation. And if, it's clearly just political theater, in my opinion.
But does the populace want increased Canadian involvement in Eastern Europe?
In general, I'd have to look at the polling. I don't think so. I think most Canadians couldn't even point out Ukraine on a map. In fact, I think there was an American study on that said the less likely you are to point out Ukraine on a map, the more likely you are to want involvement in the country and to want to send troops on the ground. I'd have to. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so the media is not beating the war drums frantically over there.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are in Canada. I got to be honest. I've been reading mostly foreign media when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine stuff. Canada is not my. I'll refer to Canadian media when it comes to Canadian issues, but they're not going to be my first go-to source for geopolitics by any stretch. 90% of journalists are already just people sitting in their basements, reading tweets and creating their own political story around it. So I'm going to try to go to people on the ground, or at least people who have worked in the countries, Russia or Ukraine, before.
So one of the big disagreements I've heard is the Western or American specifically perception of COVID lockdown measures in Australia. I know that Claire Lehman and Tim Poole
I knew you were going to bring up that name.
well, yeah, I mean, they got into it pretty hard because he's saying, oh, there's concentration camps, and she's saying, well, there's good looking people there. And there was also someone on Joe Rogan, I believe, who was saying that the Western perception of how bad it is in Australia is completely propaganda in the other way, that they're trying to make Australia look worse than it is. Just how bad was it in your experience?
In my experience, I was never in the COVID camps, but it was very horrendous. So Canada's bad, but it was definitely worse than Canada. I mean, you had to have apps tracking everywhere you went on your phone. You couldn't even get in an Uber without scanning it and having the government knowing where you were at any given location.
So full-blown surveillance of the populace.
Full-blown surveillance. And the biggest problem actually wasn't even the lockdown policy. It was how often it changed. It felt like we were doing a practice in insanity. We're going to tell you one rule. For 2 weeks, you have to stay indoors, and you can only go out once a week for groceries if you're wearing a mask. Oh, jokes, 3 days early, you can leave the house now, and you're going to be free for the next month. Oh, jokes, actually 1 week later, we've closed the borders, and my husband and I at the time were living on the border of another state, so we were very close. So I remember there was one point where my husband accidentally took a wrong turn and drove across the state border and then drove back, but it took a picture of his license, and it was like, you've been in another state, you have to quarantine.
Oh, wow.
So it was just like madness so many times, because we had family that lived in different states as well. We'd have to, okay, this border, it's just been announced, this border is closing at midnight. Get in the car, we're going on a road trip. We got to get here before midnight and wait in a line. And if we're any later, then we won't be able to see our family for XYZ holiday, right? That happened. That was happening every month. So I like nearly lost our minds. Like, it was bad.
Well, I mean, the point I made is that intentionally or not, some very, very bad people got some very useful information of how much the populace would be willing to put up with.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is a good example. Like, you keep switching things. Like, okay, are they going to start freaking out? Like, and there was clearly a consideration on the parts of the authorities in each country about what can we do and what we can get away with.
I think this is the problem when everything down to, your property, banking, all of that is so centralized in government hands and control. People know they have nothing they can do, especially when you have a kid. When you have a kid, if anyone watching this doesn't have a kid, the globo homo, they will have you by the throat. There's nothing you can do, because you don't, any decision you make to try to stand up to what you feel is oppressive, horrible government policy is going to affect your child, and they can't make that decision. They can't make that decision to not have a home, to not have food on the table. So you're putting them at risk, and people know this. The family are what make you vulnerable. Family in every case has been what has made me vulnerable to, hey, we want to see your phones. You want to go to that funeral? Yeah. You want your parents to be able to see their grandchild for the first time in a year? Well, you better listen. And that's they get you with that.
Jesus. Okay. Lauren, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Oh, probably talking about the lighter topics, although I do feel we didn't really get into how you hate Lord of the Rings, and you need to answer for that. I enjoyed learning that you play Dungeons and Dragons, though. That's cheeky. I like that.
You are welcome.
Watch Yellowstone for free on Pluto TV. All this weekend, Pluto TV is streaming a marathon of seasons 1 to 3 of Yellowstone, the show The Wrap calls a smash hit series. Pluto TV also has hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows like Mission Impossible 3, Gladiator, CSI, and more. Absolutely free. So download the free Pluto TV streaming app and watch Yellowstone seasons 1 to 3 free.